So, I've spoken a lot in the past about the Mia palette and how it's my favorite gouache set of all time, and how I advise it for beginners to start with this if you're trying to get into gouache. Now, that's not how I started. I initially bought 35 euros worth of gouache in this little box here, and I couldn't make this work for the life of me, okay? I spent so much time struggling with the consistency of these paints that I never got a hang of them in the end, and I could never really enjoy the whole process or make finished pieces with it because I was struggling so bad. I think another thing that also kind of made this hard was the fact that I'm not really great at color theory at the time that I was like trying this out, and I think I'm a little bit better now. So I've been really curious after years of only using the Hemi, of practicing my craft, of getting better at gouache. How are my skills now, and can I actually make these work? Are these as bad as I remember, or was it just me? I'm really curious to know. I am also dreading this so bad. I gotta be honest with you, I'm really nervous about this because I hated painting with these. I don't think it was a paint. Well, I'm not saying it's a bad palette or they're not great or it's a bad brand. That's not what I'm saying. I just didn't enjoy the process at the time, and it could be 100% my fault. It could have been lack of expertise. It could have been a whole lot of things. It can be the paints. I know the consistency is going to be different because jelly gouache is completely different from all the other paints, no matter the brand. But, I'm just curious to see how it's gonna work. And I'm pretty anxious because what if it's like a total shit show and this doesn't go well? But also, what if it's so fantastic and I fall in love with these? I don't think there's like a good option for this. I don't know. I don't know. So what I'm going to be looking out for during this video, the consistency of the paints, the dry time of the paints, how the paints look before drying versus after drying, because we know that gouache darkens a little bit once it's dry. The color payoff, I want to see if they're vibrant or not. The Hemi feel really vibrant to me every time I use them, so I do want to see if this can match up or if it's even better, who knows, pigment-wise. And overall, the experience, the pleasurefulness, the pleasure I feel by painting with these, how the whole process goes. Am I like really happy using them? Do I have fun? All of that. So those are the kind of things I'm going to be looking out for throughout this process. I'm already plowing myself quite a bit, so let's just get into this. Let's jump into the painting. So let's talk a little bit about the entire process and what the idea was. I decided to paint these little fishies. They're very, very cute, and the idea was to use the primaries to make the oranges and then use a blue background. I wanted like a darker blue to make the colors pop because I didn't think the white was going to be contrasty enough, so I wanted to use the blue for that. My idea was to use as little white and black as possible. I did use a bit of white by the end, and I used a tiny little speck of black, which I do regret, to add some final details on the fish's eyes and mouth. I do regret that, should have done it differently, but that's beside the point. So I wanted to talk with you guys a little bit about the process and what I found about these paints. So this was a very difficult situation for me because I was thinking these things throughout the process, and then I reached the end and I was like, hell, was I stupid? Was I drunk? What is going on? Because none of it was actually matching. I don't know. So let's just start from the beginning. I was mixing these colors and they seemed very vibrant, but I was throughout this process thinking, oh, they're not as vibrant as the Hemi. They cannot compare to the Hemis. So I just kept going and mixed them, and they were doing pretty well. The colors were looking pretty good. And I felt like they started to get muddy and murky by a certain point, and I would try to achieve a lighter, brighter color, but I just couldn't achieve that. To be completely fair, my water, paint water was very murky at that point. And I'm not sure if that contributed, but I never change water when I'm painting with the Hemis, which are my like point of comparison. This is not a comparison video, but it is my point of comparison. So I really struggle to understand, like, was it because of that? But if it is, like, I mean, shouldn't it work either way? I don't know. I am going to next time try to keep my water as clean as possible to see if it still happens. So that's definitely something I want to keep my eye out for next time. But I did feel like they were getting a bit murky and like with less saturation. I did realize that throughout the process of mixing the colors was that you have a really bright yellow, a really bright red, you mix them and it becomes a really nice orange, but it loses a slight bit of brightness. And I think the more you mix it up, the more it loses that brightness. I don't know. It was something I felt throughout this process and I kept struggling with it. I do want to try this more often and paint more with these paints to really figure that out and see if that's like true or if it was the water. When it comes to consistency, you will notice right off the bat that I go back to the palette 1,000 million different times. And the smaller the details, the more I go into the palette. That's because these paints dry like crazy. They dry really, really, really fast. Gouache dries fast. It's known, right? But since I'm used to the jelly gouache, that one doesn't dry as fast as this. This was like literally drying as I was painting. Like going from the palette to the paper, my brush would dry enough so it was just too dry, and I ended up having these like dry brush strokes that I had to incorporate into the painting because I was just struggling to get things down. And I would have to go get water to water things down again, but then it looked like watercolor and it murkied everything. I struggled a bit because of this. So the paints dry really, really fast. Is it something that would deter me from using these paints? Probably not. I think with time I'll get used to it. But I also think that if it weren't for my expertise already with gouache, I probably wouldn't be as comfortable with this. And I think this is one of the things that I really struggled the first time I used these before I got into gouache, before I had the Mihimi and started really liking gouache. I struggle with getting the right consistency. It was either watercolory or really thick gloopy paint, and I couldn't figure it out. It would dry really fast on the palette. I couldn't even keep them wet enough throughout the process. That's what I remember struggling with at the time, and I do feel like that is still a reality. I've just gotten better with it, and I can now manage it a lot better. So I do think that with the expertise I have right now, giving it some time and practice, I think I can get a hang of it, and it isn't something that's going to deter me from using these paints in the future for sure. Another thing I've realized throughout this process was that these paints are liars. They are liars, okay? So they like I mentioned before, they didn't seem much saturated for me, and they didn't seem really bright, but you will see in the a little bit forward that once I added the blue, the contrast just made them pop and they look really, really, really vibrant. The blue is very, very, very rich, and if you honestly give it a look, the red is also very rich. The yellow is very light, so against the white paper it's not very noticeable, but even the yellow is very rich. The blue is spectacularly rich in pigment, and that definitely makes a difference comparing it to the Hemis, right? Because that initial thought that I had, oh, the Hemis are so much brighter, I literally went back to my sketchbooks and compared, and they are not. They are not brighter at all. They're not more vibrant than this. This is vibrancy to the max. Like, it is stupid vibrant, and it made me fall in love with these paints. Like, the color payoff made me fall in love with these paints, and I literally felt like I was leveling up, because in truth, even with the struggles of getting the right consistency, the painting looks so good in the end. And that's a really big plus for me, especially at the level that I am right now. But consistency is key with gouache, so for anyone that's starting off, maybe it won't be as easy. Now, when it comes to the changing of the colors, right? Something that gouache does a lot is you have a color when it's wet, you put it in the paper, it looks light, and then when it dries down a lot darker, and you're like, fuck, what now? I felt this a lot throughout the process, and I think because the colors kept getting like less saturated the more I mixed them, I struggled a lot to add highlights to these fishies. You can see at the top of the head of the middle fish, I have some yellow. That was me trying to bring some brightness back, and I was struggling with that. I feel like the blue background helped a lot with that, but this is something I did struggle, right? I was looking at them really bright in the palette, adding them paper pretty bright, and then they dried down and dried really dark. Again, this is normal, it's gouache. I do want to, let you know that this still happens with this type of paint, okay? But it is definitely something to keep an eye out. And I think, if I figure out what made it murky, I might be able to combat this a bit. I just hope that the murkiness was really due to the water. Who knows? We shall find out, I guess. And yeah, I think that's basically like my thoughts overall. I'm gonna let you guys finish up and watch me paint the background, which is like really fast. So yeah, and I'll get back to you guys with the final thoughts on the painting process. So here's the finished piece. As you guys saw, I'm really happy with it. It looks fucking fantastic, like really spectacular. And I know I've talked a lot about this already. I've talked throughout the process with you guys, telling you what I thought throughout it, but I want to make just a little catch up and just give you my final thoughts about this. So in the beginning, I told you guys that I was going to go over a few topics, and I want to go over them right now with you guys. So when it comes to color and value, I have to say these are far superior from the Himi. Granted, this is not a video comparison between the two, but these are the two references that I have, so I'm going to be comparing them, because they are what I can talk about, I guess. But these are a lot more vibrant. I think it's not even vibrancy, it's just they're saturated. They are pigmented like crazy. Have you looked at this blue? Honestly, the camera does not make it justice. I'm looking at it, it does not make it justice. This is vibrant, this is bright, this is luscious, this has color in it, and it made me shake. Everything in me quaked when I realized that the Himi cannot compare. It cannot. It really cannot. And once when I was painting just the fish, I was like, oh, it's not that bright, But once I kind of put the background color in, when I put the blue in, it looked so fucking fantastic, guys. It looked amazing. The colors just popped into life and they look great, and I just can't stop looking at them because they look so amazing. So definitely a great choice of background, just but they really impressed me color wise because they are really vibrant. Consistency wise, these paints were a bit complicated, okay, and I definitely felt what I felt back then when I first tried these, when it comes to getting the right consistency. So it all amounts to the amount of water you have in your paints, but if you put too much, it looks like watercolor. If you put too little, it's so thick you can barely get a straight line, and you're constantly having to struggle with that. And I feel like these paints dry fast, like stupid fast. They're really dry, and sometimes when they're very dry in the palette, they kind of feel a little bit chalky. I'm not saying they have chalk, I'm saying they feel a little bit chalky because they dry out so fast. while the Hemi, even when they're dry, they don't feel chalky when you reactivate. They feel a little bit, but not as much as these ones, right? So I do feel like it's very annoying because you're constantly reactivating a paint that's constantly drying and you just can't get the right effect. So I found that I was constantly going back to the water to re-wet the paint constantly over and over and over again, which is kind of annoying, and it kind of takes out the pleasure of just the painting, you know? So that's definitely like a minus for me. In regards to mixing the colors with each other, they mix really, really well, which isn't surprising because this particular set is called color mixing, so mixing colors actually. So, you know, you'd expect they would mix pretty well, but they do mix pretty well. The colors are pretty vibrant. The only thing I find, and this might be my own brain, but I find that when you mix like the red and the yellow, because this is a primary set, it creates an orange that is bright, but not as bright as the red and the yellow were. I think they kind of died down when you mix them. I don't know. This might be in my own brain, but I did feel that throughout the painting process, and I do think that's relevant to let you guys know. And finally, did I enjoy the process? Was it fun? Yes, it was very nice. It was also frustrating because I didn't want it to be this nice. But I do enjoy, when it comes to mixing, when it comes to working with the paint, I do enjoy the Hemi a bit better, but just the color payoff of these paints and how many colors you can get with just mixing them, it was fantastic. It also allowed me to really practice mixing colors and color theory and have to think about that, which was something that I wanted to get into in this painting, and with this palette as well. So I definitely think that I'm going to be using this a lot more. I honestly thought this was going to be in my drawer for the rest of my life and I was never going to use it again. Definitely am going to start using them. Definitely want to start painting a lot more with these. Now, to whom would I advise these for? Beginners? No. Beginners, go ahead and do the Hemi. I would always say 100%, if you're a beginner, go with the Hemi. There's a lot more color, there's a lot more colors, there's a lot more paint. The consistency of the Hemi will definitely help you learn how to mix gouache better, and I feel like if you start with the Hemi and then you move up to these, they will be a lot easier to work with. I can thank the Hemi paints for what I've learned that now make me able to use these. So it's all thanks to the Hemi. So definitely if you're a beginner, go for the Hemi. It's a lot better price-wise, like consistency wise, everything wise, it's pretty good. Now, if you're a bit of a more experienced painter with gouache, definitely give this a try. This is definitely great. If you've been trying it for a while, definitely 100% advise you to try other types of gouache tube paints. This is from Talens, but I think that any other brand also works pretty nicely. I definitely want to try more colors of this, work a bit more with these paints in the future. But if you are a ride or die Hemi paint palette, try this. Okay, trust me, you gotta try it. If you feel a bit more comfortable with gouache, with mixing, with getting the right consistency, definitely this is a nice one up. I think it's just a level up, you know? I don't know. I think so. I changed my mind. I can't believe I actually changed my mind. It was so surprising to me after finishing this painting. I had to take a breather because I was like, fuck. I actually love this. This looks fucking fantastic. I have to admit that it was a pleasant surprise. It was a pleasant surprise. Anyways, I would love to compare these two, like actual do a comparison video of like trying the various colors, trying to mix them, see how long they dry, how long they take, like actually do an in-depth video on that. So if you're interested to see like comparing the Hemi with this gouache or any other type of gouache, let me know. So anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching. I will see you guys in the next week. Don't forget to subscribe and comment down below what you thought about the video, and yeah, I'll see you next week. Bye.